Welcome everyone to this first official Knowledge Gap Conference companion panel discussion. So we try to make something that's open to the general public as opposed to our closed circles of conference participants, and I think it's working. We have a lot of people on here that are not on the conference proper. I'm happy to welcome Lars Rönnbäck and Rogier Werschkull, who are speaking at the conference, and is our special non-conference speaker guest, Lauren Balik. Maybe the three of you can very quickly introduce yourselves. Maybe Lauren, you can start.
Yeah, thanks. Lauren Balik, based New York City in the US. I run Upright Analytics, small data consultancy. We do everything, modeling, whatever different flavor of model you prefer, everything from Data Vault to Kimball and everything else under the sun. Do a lot of analytics work, and really work with companies from as small as 50 people startups all the way to Fortune 500, biggest companies in the world. So I've seen a lot of the good, a lot of the bad, and have a lot of opinions about things.
Okay, maybe Lars, you go next.
Yeah, okay, Lars Rönnbäck. I work at a small consultant company in Stockholm, Sweden. Been in the business for about 20 years, working with data in all shapes and forms. I also work as a part-time researcher at Stockholm University in information modeling. And some of you may know me from being one of the people behind a modeling technique called anchor modeling. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, Rogier Werschkull, 22 years in the field of data and analytics. Currently, I work as a freelance data architect / analytics engineer / data engineer / product owner for a health data startup company here in the Netherlands. I've done everything from front-end BI, OLAP development, business objects, data warehousing, architecture, data warehouse automation. And obviously I also know my way around about the different modeling techniques that exist and seem to be used less and less. I have the feeling, but
yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Christian Kaul. I call myself a data modeling aficionado and data structure designer. But I think what this means in practice, I do similar stuff to the three people that we have on the panel today. So I'm doing data modeling, data engineering for data warehouse kind of things. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And so I guess we can go into the questions proper. And Rogier, since you already mentioned it, I will start with a few questions of the type: is here to stay, should go, will be gone soon anyway, is gone already. Let's start with like general data modeling. So Rogier, what is your feeling? Is it here to stay? Should it go? Will it be gone soon?
It's definitely here to stay. I mean, without it, I think proper data information cannot exist. The problem is more, is the amount of good data modeling increasing, or is it snowed under sort of bad practices? And my short opinion on that is that it looks like, depending, if you look at the 20 years that I do this work, that it's not improving. More of the feeling that it's getting worse. So it should stay, but it's not in a good state, I think. Or we're not in a good state.
Lauren, what's your take?
Yeah, data modeling is here to stay. I mean, it has to be, you have to model data in some way, in some kind of structure, right? And, maybe, I think a lot of the guests here are European based and, in the US, especially with a lot of the startups that have come, into fruition in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You know, a lot of these companies I work with, like, they don't have any kind of data model. And when we put this like together, we start planning how we're going to build BI, analytics, basic reporting. You know, a lot of these teams, they may have 2, 3, 4 people who have worked there for a year or more, but they're just kind of plugging away, where every dashboard is its own model and its own query. Every you know, every little piece of work, every request from the finance, the marketing, the business, whoever, is its own mini model and and mini query. And you know, it's part of this go, 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 go attitude of you know, how a lot of these companies are structured. And you know, contrast this with, you know, some of my bigger customers, you know, enterprises, like, yeah, they have a data model. The query, the usage is separate from the model, and the model doesn't get changed that much. You know, when there's new schema put in, new system, yeah, you change the model, but the model is its own thing. And the queries and usage are separate from that. But what I've seen in the last couple of years is just this divergence. And you know, I think a lot of that's coming to an end, at least in the US, with like how our economy is doing, and all this money that's flown in to the economy is drying up. And you know, now you can't actually have 4, 5, 6, 7 analysts all doing their own data models. We're actually going to get to a point where a lot of these companies are going to have to start thinking about this properly and build the structure, build the model, and save a lot of money actually by doing it.
Lars?
Yeah, I think we have to separate data model from integrated data model. I mean, most of the data that we have is modeled in some way. And I think the issues we have right now is with the integrated data model. I mean, it's not like analysts are working with unmodeled data. They are just not remodeling it or integrating it into an integrated data model. And which is sad, because like it's sort of hurting my feelings, because that's what I take pride in doing. So and I also believe so right now we're seeing a movement where it's a lot of data that is being pushed around, but keeping its original model, and less integration being done. And I think that's a big mistake. I think, like you said, Lauren, companies over here will also realize sooner or later that they need an integrated data model. I also believe that it's easy to get stuck sort of in your own frame of reference, where at least here in Sweden also we've been working a lot with ensemble modeling techniques that are quite adaptable to change. We have a lot of success stories, not a lot of failed data warehouses using that technique. But I believe that that's from my own bias and frame of reference when I look at it. I believe there's a lot of actually failed models out there in data warehouses, maybe using other techniques. And we have to recognize this fact also, because if you have, like someone, Mark here is saying in the chat, someone tried an enterprise data warehouse and it failed, or it just took too long, well, then it's quite easy to grasp for any new technology that comes along and promises to solve this.
Yeah, I can, if I may react to that.
Yeah, sure.
I think, for instance, I recognize that in the Netherlands, for instance, I think I hear a very, very loud crackling. What's that? Oh, yes, or it's gone. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, like 10 years ago, data vault was really big, right? It started, I think, here in Sweden, and there was this whole wave of data vaults being implemented in companies. But I think what happened and what I've seen is that while the methodology is, I think, sound and right and makes sense, that the way it was taught, and also the way it was implemented by a lot of companies was as in selling it or implementing as a technical exercise, as in we take our source data model 3NF and we automate that in a 3NF version of a data vault, and then everything. And that does not work, right? That's not proper integration. That doesn't scale. And then there is no sense in going further with that model. And then you say, data vault, it's a useless methodology. I only get more tables and I don't see advantage. Yeah, that makes sense, but that's not the fault of the methodology. That's applying it in the wrong way. And that's why I've now see that it's being used less and less, and the people have thrown it away, which is sad.
But are they replacing it with something or just doing no modeling at all?
Yeah, I think maybe back to some dimensional or no modeling. I'm really sure, and I'm not sure. Maybe the last years I might working a bit more for startup kind of companies that take modeling less serious. But I mean, it's also what I've heard about other clients and companies and in my network that data vault has gotten a bit of a bad name, which I think it's not right if you look at it from a methodology point of view.
Maybe this leads over to my next question. Hi Tanja, you made it. My next question is again in the like is here to stay, should go, will be gone soon anyway. Wayne, so we've in this LinkedIn discussions lately, ELT seems to be getting like also a bit of a bad name because people seem to assume like ELT is in fact just EL. So you extract and load something and then you don't really transform it into a shape that helps you with your analytics. So what's your take on like the T part of ELT? Like in what shape is it? What's going on here? Maybe Lauren, you want to start again?
Yeah, sure. I think so. Talk about buzzwords, right? Like you can just mix these letters up. You can do TEL if you wanted to. You can transform how the schema comes out of an application, and you can just mix up these letters however you want. And I think actually like a lot of this is driven by the idea that like, okay, data engineers, a good data engineer is an expensive person to hire for a company as a consultant or as a full-time person. So because it's hard to, write Python or Java and find someone who's good at it, we can use Fivetran or we can use whatever, different product to do the EL. But what a lot of people don't actually realize is that these vendors already do the T because they have defined schemas. Like if you take, any of these applications and you want to, use, I don't know, some email platform, they're going to define already what the schema looks like on the other end when you load it in. So the T is already happening a little bit that the vendor made, and they did it in a way, in most cases, so it maximizes their revenue because they charge on row-based or gigabyte-based, and they're going to do whatever, lands the data in a way that, they make a little bit more money. And if you actually look through all these EL vendors and see the schemas that are resulting in this in the data warehouse from it, you'll kind of notice this. As far as the T goes, like I think like with the rise of the cloud, like your Snowflakes, your Google BigQueries, things like that, based on their models of how they charge for consumption and credits, a lot of companies that do ELT, it starts off cheap, but very quickly that T part starts to add up. And to my earlier point, the more of these like individual models, that happen here, very quickly, your bill goes $5,000 a month, $8,000 a month, 12,000, 30,000. And then very quickly, the costs kind of get out of control. And so I think that like a lot of these companies that are doing like all this crazy T so much, like I think it's gonna have to go away at some point because like I mentioned earlier, like there's a lot less money, at least in the US and Canada right now. You know, in the last couple of years, oh, everybody's getting venture capital funding, everybody's getting private equity funding, everybody's going public, and there's money everywhere. And so you can get away with these crazy bills. But as these bills add up now, and there's less money out there, I think a lot of companies, and I already see it, are going to move this T back, so it's not being done in the warehouse as much, and it's not just loading, you know, dollar after dollar after dollar to make a BI dashboard.
Is improving the cost of that T, doesn't it indeed boil down to making more shared integrated models and building them in an incremental way after you've done your EL? That would be the way to scale, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly how you scale it. And that's by, you know, adhering to this integrated model, more so than like, you know, everything's its own little microservice model. And then you know, fork that over and make a new model for the new dashboard. And you've got, you know, 50 models, 100 models going on, because this is what's happening in a lot of cases right now, especially at these smaller companies that, you know, kind of just go with the T part.
Tanja, what's your take on this?
Yeah, you see it in the cloud cost structures also. As soon as you're going to large amounts of data is not cheap anymore, because you pay for the I/O. So you have to have other strategies, and now you see combinations coming in public-private cloud vendors, so that you do your data transformation on your private cloud because that's cheaper, and only do the part where you publish on the public cloud, because otherwise the costs are growing exponentially. We've done some tests in the university to predict the cost, and well, I think most companies will go bankrupt if you have to pay the bill for that one. So I think at the end of the day, the transformation has to be done in the right way. And they want to cut costs on there, but it's not possible, because it is interpretation, and the computers and the AI we have now is just not good enough in interpreting the data to get away with not modeling. I think it's impossible to do no modeling.
Lars, what do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting if the revenue model of the cloud is like sort of changing the way we do things, maybe back to doing them in a way that maybe it's not the most efficient way to do it, but we have to because of the specific pricing model. But regarding the acronym, I think in any combination of ELT, I think it needs to go away, because it's somehow ELT to me is not really what it is right now. I think most people have a perception of ELT being something else with maybe a bit of schema on read and things like that. So I think the terminology there is getting blurred of what it really stands for as well. So I'd rather see us use different ways to talk about what we're doing. Maybe we should just spell it out what we're doing. We're doing transformations, we're doing integration, we're etc.
Rogier, anything to add?
Yeah, for instance, if I teach something about these concepts and the order in I think that I do work in a modern data warehouse. I say I don't do ELT, I do EL, and then X times open bracket TC, and the T stands for cache. It's again loading it to it's sort of you should be able to throw away, I think, any persistent result and rebuild it from your historical staging area. But that is a multi-step, so X time transform it, cache it in an incremental step. That's the pattern. So if you think about ELT, that's just to for me, that doesn't cover it. It doesn't end at that T at the end. Then there's the additional steps of data modeling and caching the data. And there's a second thing. The term ELT, ETL are used in two different ways. They're used in doing the order of work, but they're also used by or have been used by tech vendors as my tool is an ETL or ELT tool, and with that I mean that, for instance, that they either push the compute down to the database or that they absorb the data in there, that they take it in their own system CPU. So those letters are also used in not as a architecture, but the way that the tool internally works. So that also, and those conversations are mixed, which doesn't help.
Definitely, yes. Another case of like data people being really bad with the terminology.
Yeah, and in the cloud solutions, the transformations in between the different stages are also costly. It's also I/O, and they're all forgotten because they're the small arrows usually in the data architecture picture. But when it comes to paying the bill, you're not happy.
It's interesting that you're bringing up this cloud cost topics so much, which brings me to my next round. Like if you would have asked me like even a few months ago, I would have said like cloud data warehousing, it's unstoppable, it's going through the roof. Now I'm not so sure anymore. So again, like here to stay, should go, will be gone soon question. Maybe to Tanja, you have already done some research. What's your take?
Yeah, well, I've hired some specialists in the minor about cost cutting and the costs in cloud because I didn't know anything about it. So now I'm up to date. I'm very happy with that. And there are several ways for it, and it all depends also on the time to market you need with your data warehouse. And the experts also say 80% of your data warehouse functionality doesn't need to be immediate. So you could do that more cheaply and in a different way, and only be very aware of what you need immediately, and put the costs there. And that's their take. And they have different scenarios for that, and they're slowly but surely developing scenarios to keep the costs for using the cloud in a wise way for your data structures in place. So it's getting there.
Who want to go next?
Were you asking me, Christian? Or?
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Sorry. What was the question? Repeated specifically.
Yeah, like the whole cloud data warehousing thing. Will it stay that way? Will it keep growing? Will it go down again?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be here to stay. It's too easy to use, and like, you know, I really struggle to see too much like moving back to on-prem, you know, except in cases where, you know, regulated industries and such where it needs to be, at least, you know, in the US perspective. The problem is the cost though. About 10 years ago, when everyone was doing Hadoop, like a bunch of people started looking at this, and they looked around the market and they like did an analysis of it. And as it turns out, like 75% of the like Hadoop resources being used were just completely useless. And people even, you know, when they look at AWS and what AWS, Amazon Web Services, is doing out in the market, not just, you know, our world of data, but in general, like a lot of them say like 1/3 of AWS is just like not doing anything for businesses. It's just things that get left on, you know, non-efficient workflows and programs and services. And so like the cloud's here to stay, but you know, it's time to be smarter with this. And you know, a part of like, you know, my business is going into different companies and shutting buttons off, basically. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but all right, turn this off, that goes away, this is done. And you know, we'll save $75,000, $100,000 in a couple of weeks just checking stuff off. So the cloud's here to stay, but it's time to be smarter about it overall. You know, as more people learn this and there's more maturity.
Lars?
Yeah, I think also that the cloud is here to stay. I also think it's still very early days for the cloud. I mean, So I'm sure that we'll see the pricing models also change over time. I mean, if companies are starting to think it's too expensive, I think they have a lot of margins there to actually work with the pricing models. So that's definitely something we're going to see. We've already seen some cloud vendors going over to pricing models with the adaptive pricing, where depending on time of day and load and stuff like that, the price actually differs over time. So we're probably going to see changes in that also, but it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I've been wondering about this time of day thing as well, because usually when you look at like one single data center or whatever of a cloud provider, all the clients are in the same time zone, so they must scale for like peak load. So they somehow have the same issue that people had before with on-prem, just on a much bigger scale. So probably they have to think about things like making you move workloads to the night or whatever. Rogier, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the cloud's here to stay.
They try to solve it. Yes.
So I think the cloud's here to stay too. I think if you look at costs now, the projects I did, like 95% of the costs are in compute, not in storage, as most companies have less than terabytes of data. So one interesting thing to look at, for instance, is, and it's still early days for them, is how Firebolt is approaching that. Whereas in, for instance, a Snowflake, you pay for 1 credit per for the compute for the smallest instance. I know in Firebolt, and I haven't used it, and it's early days, and a lot of functionality there is missing. What you actually do is that you just take any AWS instance that exists and can use that, assign that as the compute, which also means that you can, for instance, pick spot instance and those kind of things. And yeah, there is a factor 5 to 10 difference in the price per hour of these kind of instances versus the smallest Snowflake instances, right? So I think the cost of that compute is going to go down as the competition increases. Plus, obviously, what everyone says, if you build smarter data models, and if you have actually people that turn off these buttons and set compute hibernations to lower defaults and stuff like that, so then it also helps. But
then since we're talking about like costs and cost efficiency, like one thing is of course like the cloud part or the machine part, and the other part is like the human part, like the engineering time, the development time. So we've seen some great developments in data warehouse automation, but they seem a bit limited. So many people don't really seem to be aware of what has happened in the data warehouse automation space. They're doing a lot of manual stuff, either like without really any tool support or inside things like DBT or Dataform. So what's your take? What's going on here in terms of like the human factor, the way we develop things, how efficiently we develop things? Lauren, your take on that?
Yeah, and here's how I describe this to like my customers and people that I work with, right? Like when you hire a new engineer, new data engineer, analytics engineer, or whatever, you spend the money to go hire, a new person or 2 people or 3 people, build out your team or whatever. Your cloud costs should go down because that person can be used to make, whatever's in place more efficient. So when you actually hire more people, your cloud costs should go down. Your cloud costs are only going to go up with, business requirement complexity and new applications, either upstream or downstream, or just volume of data. That's what should be changing your costs. So more people, cloud cost goes down. And this is not what's happening out there usually. What happens is more people are hired, and then cloud costs go up because these people, if they're not, fully trained, or if they're just go, you're paying for a person, an analytics engineer, data engineer, and you're paying for extra cloud costs. And you may even be paying a third way. Like now, some now we have to have it. We have two BI. We have Power BI. We have Tableau already. This person wants to use a different tool mode or a different BI tool. There's a new marketing director who wants a certain tool. So now you're paying three ways. You're paying for a new product, you're paying for extra compute, and you're paying for an extra person. And none of this makes sense. But it's changing now because at least in North America, US, there's less money available. And so now, okay, we're going to actually have these new people we just hired work on simplifying the model. But, when I describe this like this to some people, and like I analyze what's happened at their company over the last year, from like a new customer, they kind of look at this and then they think about it, and then, they kind of start laughing and say, oh boy, like what, yeah, you're right. All right, let's fix this. So, and it sounds silly, right? It sounds like a basic concept, but it's not in place in a lot of cases.
Lars, what's
I
your
see the
take
same
on,
thing
like,
in education.
yeah, and then Tanya, you continue.
Yeah, I see the same thing in education. Less time is spent on actually learning students to code very well at a lot of programs. They all talk about using no code with students, and I'd say, well, if you're doing university level, bachelor level, at least learn them the trade on how to code efficiency and how to be aware of the cost you're making and the environmental impact you make with your code and the resources you use. And it's in a lot of programs, it's not part of the program anymore, in favor of all sorts of soft skills which they can learn after they did their bachelor. So I think it's very good that we keep emphasizing that in the programs also the trade needs to be taught to students, and also knowing about automation and knowing about data. I mean, I even heard about programs that skip the database part out of their IT program, and I thought, well, where are they going to work then if they don't know about databases? It's insane. So it's not going to happen in Rotterdam as long as I work there. So that's good, but still, I think it's crazy that people think that you can do IT without databases.
What do
and
you
knowing
think?
about coding correctly.
What do you think drives that, Tanya? That there's this push to kick that out of the curriculum. And who's making that?
Well, yeah, the perception that databases are old-fashioned. I said, well, you don't kick cars to the curb because they're old-fashioned. We still use those. So if it works, don't kick it to the curb. And also, they think that because they have the illusion that computer power, because it increases, is getting cheaper. And of course, buying personal computers is getting cheaper a little bit. Now with the chip shortage, it's different. But the main things you learned when I started in 1989 about efficient coding and using as less resources as possible is still as valid as it was at that time. So, and I think they need to learn some good old-fashioned knowledge about resource uses when you make transformation, and if you use data and about I/O and things like that. So we brought it back into the curriculum, even though people say it's old-fashioned, because the companies are happy with it.
If your computers get 2 times cheaper and your code gets 4 times slower, then in the end it becomes more expensive, right?
Exactly.
Lars, what's your take on automation and efficiency? You're on mute.
Thanks. I had the opportunity to make an interesting observation because I was at 2 different companies, and they were both starting a new data warehouse initiative at both of these companies, and approximately the same size, approximately the same type of initiative. And in one of these companies, they sort of locked 2 skilled people into a room and said that we want you to build a data warehouse and basically don't come out of this room until you have it done. And they were really successful. So it is possible to make something really efficient and get it done. On the other hand, the other company, they hired 20 people to do this data warehouse there, and they're still not finished with the data warehouse like 2 years later. Whereas the first two guys that went into that locked room, they're now maintaining 6 different data warehouses. That basically takes all their time now, but still 2 people maintaining 6 data warehouses, whereas at the other company there's still 20 people working on getting it done. So I think also businesses have like, they don't really know what they're doing when they start some data warehouse projects. My observation from this is that it's probably, you can build a good data warehouse using a lot fewer resources than you actually think. And I think the creativity that you get when you're sort of just 2 persons locked in a room needing to solve a problem is much, it's better.
But do they have to be experienced people then?
Yeah, those 2 guys, but
Probably,
I wouldn't, but I wouldn't say that there was a major difference in experience between these 20 guys either. It's just that for some reason it's not happening there. It's not working for them.
Yeah, I just to interject here, I think not only is it technical experience that drives this, but it's the ability to say no, or the ability to say you don't get this week. This is on the plan for 3 weeks from now. Like that's when we're gonna do. We're not gonna rush and build this new thing right now. We're gonna build the whole integrated model, and then we're gonna get it. And a lot of younger people, it's nothing to do with technical skills, coding skills, or even design skills. It's just the ability to say no or to wait a little bit. And when environments they can't say no and they need to keep go, you get like the situation here, which is okay, like what you just described, Lars. There's like 20 people working in a place, and I think that that stakeholder maturity, just business maturity, is actually what causes a lot of this and lack of it.
So I think there's definitely a factor like, I don't know, like work expense to fill the time available. And I think this is also true for like the money available and just the number of people available. I've also been involved in a data warehousing initiative in like financial industry, and they had more than 100 people occupied for several years for a like fairly small data warehouse with like only, to be honest, 1 subject area, which could have been done like, I don't know, 3 months with 2 people.
Democracy is not always contributing to getting things done now.
Yeah, there's still the mythical man month, right? The book about scaling scaling people. You can't.
Definitely.
But now that you mention it, the Mythical Man Month, there's this book definitely. There's also Data and Reality. There's some other classics that are like 20, 30, 40, even 50 years old. And for some reason, people, I don't know if they really have ever read them, but they definitely don't read them anymore. And I think this is a big issue. There's so much knowledge that has already been there in like the 80s, 70s, 60s even is lost. And this is really, like, this is also what the whole like knowledge gap initiative, like the conference and this and everything is about. Somehow we must make people aware of like the extent of the ignorance, like to make them aware that they don't know what they don't know, and like somehow like relearn things that people like Fred Brooks or Bill Kent or Ralph Kimball or whatever already knew like 30, 40, 50 years ago. What's your take on this? Is it really that bad? And if so, what can we do about it? Tanja, since you're working in education, maybe you can make the first statement.
Yeah, well, I've put it in the chat where the people think that only young people can do innovation and that they have the best ideas and that they can make things better. And they also usually think that change makes things better, and it isn't always true. Sometimes you need experience, or you need to have gone through the experience and knowing things that do not work, and then you can teach the younger ones. And if you have really not diverse teams with different types of experiences, you will never get there, because they're going to repeat all the mistakes the more experienced people already have made. And sometimes they say, well, you're a cynic because you've been in the business for 30 years, but I'm a cynic for a reason, you know? Yeah, I mean, I've seen it go wrong, and of course it isn't what they want to hear, that the happy path isn't going to be so fast. But well, in the end, they want quality, don't they? So you need to have a diverse team. You need the young people that have the fresh ideas, but you also need to call all these to tell you what is not going to work, because they've done that and seen that. So diversity in the team, I think, will help a lot, and not too big teams also, because then you don't have to discuss as much and you can actually do some work.
Definitely, Rogier.
Yeah, I've been thinking about what Lauren said earlier. I think one of the culprits indeed is, or could be, that compute is got way too cheap in comparison, right? Like previously in the early days, compute was so expensive, and also storage. You had to be very serious about data modeling and do that properly. If not, then it just simply wouldn't work. And now that's not the case. So you can indeed throw endless amount of relatively cheap compute at it. I mean, I've heard the same kind of stories between operational app development, that if that's looking at the amount of functionality versus the number of CPU cycles, that it's that ratio is sort of that it did not really improve. And I also saw a comment coming by here from Florian. He said, blah, 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 I'm doing more agile projects where agile is requested and we need to produce tangible results really quickly. And that's another example that in a lot of companies that like agile is like greatly abused, right? If you look at the original agile manifesto, if you just look at the page or at the principle, it doesn't say that the only thing that you should do is create results just as quickly as possible and totally ignore quality. But that's how agile is being abused in a lot of companies, right? Results. And yeah, it doesn't matter how you get there and if it doesn't scale.
Lauren?
So as a solution, maybe make compute a lot more expensive for people just starting out.
That's a funny idea. How many years of experiences you get different pricing model?
You just get penalized.
I think to the point here, like agile is actually what drives a lot of, like, I don't know, bad modeling or inefficient modeling, because the way data modeling works, and like this is, you know, maybe I'm biased because, you know, I run a consulting firm, but this is what I've seen throughout my career. This is what a lot of older people have even told me, like, you know, how it's always been, like, it's like 80-20. Like it's like data modeling is naturally waterfall based. Like if you do a bunch of stuff up front and do it right and get most of the stuff together and do this like a waterfall, then you don't have to constantly model later. You can just kind of, you know, run queries for BI, or you've already pre-made what's, you know, going to feed an application or whatever your use case is, coming out of a database, data warehouse, etc. And the more you do up front, the less you pay later in terms of tech debt, of actual money, of cash, of time. And agile is like actually I think it's one of the biggest threats to good data modeling, because it's like, you know, it results in like what I talked about earlier, which is a lot of US startups, especially around DBT, it's, you know, quick model, you know, make some SQL files, here's another SQL file, reference this other one, go into a dashboard. Okay, now we have a new agile story for the new week. Okay, let's make another, let's use some parts from this model And it's just these graphs basically of SQL files. And it's all driven by Agile. And so I actually, maybe I'll take it a little bit further. And I think Agile is actually one of the biggest threats to good data modeling out there, to expand on that point.
Lars, anything from your side about Agile or education problems? Still on mute.
Sorry?
Thanks. Well, no, I've seen also from the educational perspective, since I'm involved with the university over here, we also have the same issues that modeling as a topic is being downplayed a lot right now, which is a shame, of course, but I suppose with the limited time students have and the number of new technologies that are arising, something has to give way for other things to enter the curriculum. But it's the same here. And with respect to Agile, I mean, at some of the companies, I work with different companies here in Sweden, and some of the companies, they are like constantly reorganizing according to some different type of flavor of Agile. And so it's like one day we're having Scrum Masters, the other day it's Kanban boards, and now it's SAFe. So it's like, yeah. I mean, I talked to a lot of the other employees on the ground there, and they are getting exhausted by all this. And it's not really producing any good results. Yeah. So I'm not really a proponent of Agile, but
yeah, but it has nothing to do with Agile. That has to do with Scrum, with the methodology that is abused. Again, if you look at the original Agile manifesto, at the principles there on page 2, or read a book like like Clean Agile from, I think, Uncle Bob, in the way that he describes it. It's that all these things. Agile is again an example that something was created with good intentions, which has been horribly abused, and also by obviously everybody creating their own version of Agile with training and certifications around it. I mean, if Shane Gibson were here, then he could go on about this like for hours. But for instance, on the second page, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility, right? That's in the example of Lauren with these kind of DAGs in DBT. That's not doing that, right? So my opinion has nothing to do with Agile, just creating massive spider web stovepipes.
Yeah, but I'm very much for Agile in that sense. I mean, I usually say that you shouldn't build models to last. You should build them for change, because only then can they truly last. So I strongly believe in models that evolve over time and are agile in that respect.
Now that we're talking a bit of like reorganizing according to like hype and flavor of the month, of course, we have to talk about data mesh, right? So data mesh, it's started about 3 years ago, but it seems to have like exploded in the past, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. So what's your take on data mesh? Is it here to stay? Will it be gone soon? Will it never really take off? Rogier, what's your take? You've done a bit of research, right?
Yeah, I obviously I cannot fully do my presentation of tomorrow, but yeah, I just did a poll a few weeks ago, LinkedIn, and it's simple. There's so many, and I think you also reacted to that, Lars. There's so many people interested in it that we have to take it seriously. If not, the chances are very high that it will again. Some of a mess will be created, because it will probably vendor washed, and tech vendors are already creating their solutions that sort of magically create a data mesh. So whether it's here to stay, I don't know. There's aspects that I find good about it that are not completely new, like data product thinking. That those concepts make sense. But really the most worrying thing I find, for instance, also when I read the book, that if you do a search on data modeling or data vault, that there's not a concept like data vault that would be super logical to use within when you talk about data integration is not even mentioned once, which makes me doubt to an extreme degree how much experience the writers of the book actually have with doing data integration for data analytics. That's my that's my point of view there, and that by itself is very worrying. And indeed, I know that there are others that thanks, David. I see the link that there are others that think it makes sense to use data vault in the context of data mesh, but it's just do a search in the book, search for data vault, 0 hits. Why not?
Lars, what's your take?
Yeah, I also find it quite worrying, primarily because, and I saw your poll there, and I also hear it at Swedish companies that there's a lot of businesses right now actually starting up their data mesh initiatives, and that's before we even know really what this is. So they're bound to hit a lot of obstacles, and one that I'm sure that they're not thinking of is data integration. I mean, they're just going to produce silos again, and that's quite worrying from that perspective, of course. Then again, well, maybe it's going to create some job opportunities for us when things turn to shit for them and we have to come in and rescue them.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think so I don't think, at least, in the US and my view of the world and who I work with, I think the data mesh is still, early if it's going to be adopted more. Like it's not that common here. In the same way that like the data vault is, common in Europe, but almost nowhere in the US. Now, I think the data mesh actually can solve two very important problems. And number one is like the idea of data contracts between upstream, like product teams or upstream services, and like, something as simple as like schema breaks. Because right now that can be a complete mess, and it often is. And I think data mesh as a process actually helps enforce that, so that teams that are upstream and maybe they're managing, some databases or an API or whatever, as part of like what they manage, that the data mesh is going to actually help bridge that gap more and lead to fewer breakages downstream. Because what happens right now is that, someone in the business or a customer, hopefully not, but sometimes, a customer will see some data break or some issue with a report or something. And then you go to the analyst, and the analyst goes back to the data engineer, and the data engineer goes back to the product engineer, product manager team. So the dashboard was wrong. And then you go analyst, you go data engineer, you go software engineer, product manager. You go through like 5 people to figure out what the issue is. And the issue is that, the software team made breaking changes that impacted the data engineer, the data architects, and then it was propagated. And so I think the data mesh actually, like with the data contract, schema defined management and more responsibility a little bit pushed to the software teams and upstream vendors, I think that actually is really going to be a really good thing. And I think it's actually enough of a problem at some organizations that's going to help it spread. And then the other piece here is like, the more of, I don't even want to call it ETL or ELT, but the more of the schema that's defined before it gets into the compute part of, data warehouse or whatever, the more of that's handled upstream, the actual cheaper it is to be doing compute usually. So because of that, there's actually a lot of cost savings that can happen because of data mesh. And I think that the quality piece that I described and the cost piece are bad enough at some companies right now that that's going to be what actually accelerates the data mesh if it takes off.
If I may react to that.
Sure.
I also don't. I agree that that part makes sense. It would make totally sense. And there's others that write about this. In fact, most data warehouse practitioners have been asking this for 30 years. It would make more sense if the developers of operational applications don't only create data artifacts that are useful in operational context, but also take care of data analytical concerns like time variance, non-volatility, making sure that a subject, a schema stays stable over time. That makes complete sense, but I think it requires the knowledge and skills of data analytical designers and data modelers to also be. They just need to be embedded within the developers of operational applications. And it's a huge cultural change. And it will only work in organizations where you can actually influence the design of your operational application. If you work with a lot of SaaS tooling or good luck changing a Microsoft Dynamic AX or SAP system. So while I hope for it to become true, I'm very skeptical that type of change will actually happen soon. At least that's my. But if this actually makes it happen, that actually starts happening, then I'm 100% for that.
Lars, you want to say something?
Yeah. Remember remember those two people I said that were maintaining 6 data warehouses? If that company were to go to a data mesh, like there's no one else at that company that could like produce data products or anything. So it would be those 2 people having to run around and creating these data products in all of those different places. So, and that wouldn't work, of course. So I think there's some smallest size of company for where a data mesh actually makes any sense at all. Probably quite large.
I must say that if you really look at the database content, it really mentions like this is only for large companies with that actually have a mature software development team that are willing to experiment. So it clearly mentions that it's not probably for 90% of the companies in existence nowadays. So only that argument, I think that's the one that I'm going to use if people ask about this. Just read up on that part. Are you that type of company? If not, then it's just not for you yet.
We see in practice that because the SaaS software isn't in control of their data, we're now unable to buy some software for the university because they can't comply with GDPR regulations, for example. We have to keep the student information hidden from companies because otherwise we have a GDPR violation, because there's a power difference between teachers and students, so you can't make it mandatory for them to share their information. And now we can't buy any SaaS software from the US because they can't comply with the GDPR regulation because they're not in control of their data. And they cannot promise us what they're going to do with the data. And it gives massive problems. So being in control of the data, even if you're a SaaS application, is going to be very, very important if you want to do business in Europe. So I think they have to move to something that gives them control in the data. And some of the things I read about data mesh could give them that opportunity by having good operational contracts in there. But again, we've tried to make a data bus in the early days and having data services and things like that. And unless somebody is making it mandatory to do that investments in that, I think it will never happen. I'm very skeptical about that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe to try to tie this all together a bit, like all the trends that we're seeing here. Do you see the chance for like some kind of renaissance of more structured data modeling approaches, like data vault, like anchor modeling, like more Kimball style dimensional modeling? Do you see some kind of like renaissance happening because of like these kinds of pressures, like regulatory, like cloud costs going on, or is this wishful thinking? Tanja, what do you think?
Well, I think the regulation helps to get the attention to data modeling. I mean, I'm using it now as leverage with the privacy officer, for example, to get them to get their data in gear and get it organized and get ownership done so that we can buy software in a normal way. But so you can use the regulations to get the data governance in order. And it will make it a top priority in the management layers of companies if you can tell them, well, you can ignore it, but then you're going to get a fine. In Europe, that helps. But on the other hand, short-term goals usually win over long-term goals. So unless the follow-up of the regulations are good, I think it's going to be very difficult to get it done.
Anyone else? Lars, you seem to be a proponent of ensemble modeling styles.
Of course, being one of the authors of anchor modeling, and well, I'm getting a little bit disillusionized anyway, because I've been trying to sort of get this technique out there, and I've tried to make it as easy as possible for anyone to get into it with open source tools. Everything is free, etc. And still, I think that both anchor modeling is small. Data Vault is not that much bigger anyway, even if it's taking off a little bit. But still, I think a lot of people equate data warehousing with dimensional models, just having like the dimensional layers. So I think this is a hard task to actually to get traction for new modeling technologies. I also think that a lot of businesses underestimate the complexity of actually building something that's going to work well and lasts for a long time. That's not easy. It's complex, particularly when you start to mix time into the picture as well. If you need to keep a history of changes, and if you somehow also need to keep a history of corrections, so you need a bitemporal solution, I promise you there's like 99% chance they will go wrong if they don't use like a proper methodology. But somehow they underestimate the complexity and overestimate their own capability, and they end up using something else or using something the wrong way. So I'm not sure about the future actually when it comes to that, if it's a prosperous one or not.
Lauren, what's your take on like the chances of more structured data modeling approaches?
Yeah, I think a couple of things, right? One, like I actually think the data vault is going to be more popular here in the U.S. because in Europe it's more popular. Here it's never really taken off. You see it in insurance industries a little bit, but and here and there. But I actually think a lot more companies are actually looking at this right now and thinking about maybe it's something that they want to do, even smaller organizations. And so I'm very interested in that, and I'm keeping an eye on it. And I guess just by saying this, maybe I'm influencing this, and someone will see this and then start doing more data vault. I don't know, but I think what's going to happen is like and we got into it a little bit, but like a lot of the joining between source applications, your SAP, and then you join it with stuff from a different system, or your blah blah blah, ABCD systems, you join it. A lot more of this stuff is actually going to happen in these systems of record in the future, and it's going to be driven by finance first. If you look at like Stripe, for example, Stripe is creating basically, and you should look it up, and it's kind of interesting to see what they're doing, but they want to be the center for PayPal data, for other transaction data. And this is all going to go to Stripe, and then it goes to a data warehouse or so. So you already resolve the stuff within Stripe, and then Stripe puts it in the data warehouse instead of just, transaction logs and transaction rows. And I think that's really interesting of what they're doing. And I think this is going to continue, because what's happening now with especially around finance, where it's like most regulated and most important, there's a lot of corner cutting that's happening. And that's where the biggest disasters happen, because if something's wrong, then there's real consequences to it. And so I'm already seeing that happening. So I think this movement to application-based modeling before it even gets to the warehouse is going to happen. And I don't know, maybe you call that ETL, but whatever you want to call it, I think that's going to happen more and more.
Rogier, what's your take?
Yeah, for most, I think it starts with education. So better education on ensemble type modeling, data integration modeling, even reintroducing for data marts a good Kimball/dimensional modeling. I think it all starts there. Try to do it in what's the reason data science has taken off, right? It was framed as being the sexiest job. I think it just need better marketing. I mean, why is data mesh in the beginning? Why is data mesh taken off so hard? There's somebody dedicated 100% of his time working on that every day, creating a podcast, 2 episodes per week, collecting all the stories centrally. That drives a lot of engagement. If you just see that coming by every day, I automatically start to take it more serious. And I think maybe we need that. I think that, for instance, if you look at Data Vault, at least from my point of view, Dan Lindstedt, the founder, he sort of kind of disappeared off the stage, right? And obviously, if you hear about something less, then it will be top of mind in a lot of people's heads way less. So education, better marketing.
So basically, we should all pitch in a little bit and put someone out there with a job to just promote data modeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how it works now for data mesh. Somebody's just, Scott is doing a very good job there, and he's being paid by a company to 100% put all his time on researching this and driving this further. And I'm quite sure that helps.
So we definitely need better marketing, also probably better outreach to educational institutions. I know there's something happening like that in the Netherlands, like mostly what Tanja does, but also other people. But it's I guess too far between. So somehow we need to get out more, not just talk among ourselves, and we're kind of talking among ourselves here, but reach young people and reach a more general audience somehow.
How's that in the US, Lauren? I'm very curious on education in data and data modeling in college, university.
It's almost never covered. It's very no. At best, a CS program in college will have a class or 2 on databases, but it's not that common. Or some IT programs. I mean, most people learn on the job or through self-teaching. It's not a big part of the curriculum here at all.
No, it's the same in Holland, and that, I mean, that's a problem, right? At least I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I think it's so crazy that even right now there's people don't call it data modeling in the US right now. Like a lot of times it's called analytics engineering right now. It really means data modeling, but like it's called analytics engineering. And, there's the vendors out there saying just, oh yeah, change your job title from analyst to analytics engineer and you'll make more money. And, that's a little scammy, in my opinion, because you're taking a big risk.
Yeah, the same happened a few years ago. Everybody changed their name from BI developer analyst to data scientist, right?
Yeah.
Because I can do linear regression with 100 data points.
Yeah. I'm working on a series with good old René Veldwijk on data modeling right now. And we're going to try to publish in October in English for the first time for René, a series on good data modeling with videos on YouTube and things like that. So we're working on that to getting it out there. And I just added 2 years of data modeling mainly in the applied data science and artificial intelligence bachelor, because I think it's necessary.
Really great initiatives, and especially making like René's work more accessible, definitely. Yeah. So it seems there are things happening, but it's still, I guess we have to somehow step up. I also remember when I'm thinking back to my university education, like we had one class on basically database fundamentals, and like this was all about like normal forms. This was nothing about like data modeling as a design activity, and nothing really about like how data warehousing or analytics works. Just like, I don't know, like 2 pages or a few minutes on there's something called a data warehouse. People put like OLAP cubes in it. So basically this was the level. And in the end, I was very discouraged from like the whole data stuff at all. And I only came back by accident. And I fear this is what's still happening in a lot of universities and colleges, that they teach like very limited aspects of it and not the aspects that are like most fun or most interesting.
I think the problem is with the hiring policy. They're hiring a lot of academics who have limited deep knowledge about some subjects, but they have to teach it all, and they just teach their own subject and don't have the broad vision about it. So maybe if we can make a series and podcasts and videos and things like that to make it current again, so that people can use it in the curriculum, even though they don't have the knowledge themselves, maybe we can solve the problem. So I would love to make a series with people here on these subjects. It would be great.
Sounds like a plan. So definitely we should do something like this today more often, like different setups, different people, different number of people. But I think that this definitely could help, and maybe pull more people in than the more like more technical or less interactive presentations that also I sometimes host.
Yeah. And I can get the other 2 applied data science programs into it too, in The Hague University and Breda University. And maybe we can start a movement in Holland and spread it out to the world.
Yeah, like it happened with data vault somehow. Yeah, but this is really a great idea. We should do stuff like this more often in like podcast format, like interactive discussion format. This is really this sounds like a good approach, and especially if it's like more people driving it. Like I do a lot of stuff, but it's basically my thing, and if I'm not there because I don't know, I'm sick or I have to take care of my child or whatever, then nobody does it, and it should be like on more shoulders. Yeah, really great. Let's talk about this some more afterwards. This is really a good idea. So I think I want to end here, because we so rarely end this kind of discussion on a positive note. So I really want to take the opportunity there, because like you know how it happens usually. It's all doom and gloom. People keep saying, yeah, it's the same nonsense. I've been in the industry for 20 years, 30 years, and people don't understand it, or it's never gets better. And I really I like it though, that we have some like positive initiatives here, and we're trying to spread the word some more offensively. So thank you all. Thank you, Tanja, especially for pushing us on this. So let's make it work. Thank you everyone, and also thank you for the great audience. You made some great points, some great suggestions, and I hope to see you all soon on our next podcast or panel discussion or whatever. So thanks everyone.
Thanks
everyone.
Take care.